Welcome to Australia, land of the big skies, the best beaches in the world, and home to more species of poison snake than anywhere else on the planet. And in these 3 bags in front of me, there is enough poison to kill a small town. And this is it. This is the most deadly snake in the world, the inland taipan or fierce snake. Now he's 890 times more deadly than a diamondback rattlesnake. And this is number 2, the second most deadly snake in the world, the common brown snake. And this is number 4, the common tiger snake. Now there's nothing common about his poison, it's deadly. You might be wondering what happened to number 3. Well, I'm going to try and catch you one of those, the coastal taipan. There he is, that farmer was right, he is a big one, a really big one. And this is number 3, the coastal taipan. In my books, the most dangerous snake there is. Look at the length of his fang there. And the venom's just running out. He's a decent size, this fellow. Whack him into the bag. Don't take any chances with these fellows. They're too damn dangerous.
Christian texts have long depicted the snake as a symbol of evil. After deceiving Eve in the Garden of Eden, God is said to have punished the serpent by sentencing it to crawl on its belly until the end of time. And crawl it has to almost every corner of the globe. As they migrated to the various regions of the world, they adapted their hunting techniques to suit the prey that was available. Some developed highly toxic venom to immobilize their prey. Others, like the reticulated pythons, became masters of asphyxiation, ambushing and strangling their prey in seconds.
Today, Australia has 25% of all the elapids on this earth. They're the front-fanged venomous snakes. 30 of these are dangerous to man. 5 of them rank among the top 10 most dangerous snakes, and 11 of them have venom more toxic than the cobras.
The tiger snake ranks among the top 5 most deadly species on the planet. Tiger snakes have been able to adapt to many different environments. The extreme heat of the desert, the swamps of South Australia, and perhaps most remarkably, a few small inhospitable islands off the southern coast of Australia. Each species has evolved to maximize survival in less than ideal conditions.
Most people think that the tiger snake's just like any other deadly snake. Well, he does kill with venom, eats his prey just like the browns and the taipans and the blacks. But I think he's kind of special because this fellow can survive where others just can't. And how do they do this? They're just good eaters. They'll eat just about anything that moves.
About 9,000 years ago, tiger snakes had it made, thriving on frogs and lizards in the coastal rivers and swamps. But as sea levels rose, the tiger snake was forced inland. Here it came into contact with other venomous snakes, better suited to the harsh inland environment.
Now this is a snake. It's the 4th most deadly snake in the world. They love swamps and frogs. They don't do very well in the desert. Now you might not think there's anything special about this snake, but the story gets really strange. Tiger snakes love swamps and cold. They don't like the heat.
And then of course there was the problem of prey. The tiger snakes found that the inland regions lacked the frog populations they were used to hunting. In fact, the most staple food source was rats, and until this time, tiger snakes had not really hunted rodents. Unequipped to deal with new environmental conditions, the tiger snake population began to decline. The Kreft's tiger snake was one of the species which managed to adapt.
The tiger snake that lives here is one of the lucky ones. All around here are waterless plains. These little tiger snakes give us a clue to why they're so special. They have to survive on the annual flush of tadpoles. They only get one good feed a year.
The Kreft's tiger snake inhabits a small valley in the Flinders Ranges of Australia known as the Valley of the Tigers. This place is a veritable oasis for frogs. The cooler climate is not ideal for the average snake. Being cold-blooded animals, snakes depend on sunlight to warm their bodies and provide them with the energy needed to hunt. About 30 degrees Celsius or 86 degrees Fahrenheit is a good temperature for snakes to hunt. The Kreft's tiger snakes are smaller and darker than the common tiger snakes. Darker scales means that the body is able to absorb heat quickly, while a smaller body, particularly a smaller head, enables the snake to access the tiny rock crevices which are home to its prey. After warming its body in the sun, this Kreft's tiger takes to the water to gorge itself on frogs, or even better, tadpoles. All snakes taste and smell with their tongues. Microparticles send messages to the Jacobson's organ located in the roof of the mouth. By tasting the air, the snake is able to determine information about prey, moisture, danger, and shelter. Snakes can smell just as well underwater as they can on land. The water temperature here is quite low. This means that the Kreft's tiger snakes only have a limited time to hunt before their body temperature drops and they become sluggish. The only solution is to return to land or a hot rock to increase body heat and replenish energy reserves. This ritual will be repeated several times throughout the day. This young tiger snake has made a successful first kill. But another is not so fortunate, and it's now that the prey becomes the hunter. Meanwhile, these newly born tiger snakes seem more intent on attacking each other than hunting for prey. Because they each possess the same weaponry, namely venom, biting is useless and will do little more than draw blood. Instead, one manages to grab the other just below the head, holding on tightly until it succeeds in asphyxiating its sibling. Although the Kreft's tiger snake has successfully adapted to this valley, its dependence on a single food source makes it vulnerable. If outside forces were to impact on this environment and the frog population were to diminish, the snake population would also suffer.
If you think that snakes living in the Valley of the Tigers were impressive, prepare to be amazed when we return. The island tiger snakes, like this bloke here, have had it much tougher. They have not only managed to survive, but actually thrive on the most inhospitable islands. Adaptation is the name of the game for all the animals on this planet. 6,000 or 7,000 years ago, the seas rose and drowned out a huge area to the south of Australia, which was ideal tiger snake habitat, swamps, etc. Left a few little hills sticking out, which became islands. Now, the tiger snakes that were isolated as islands had to adapt or just die.
If they wanted to survive, the stranded snakes would need to reinvent themselves as hunters of seabirds.
Looks like it was positively taken by a snake because the head looks like it's decomposing faster from the action of the venom. And they usually try to eat them head first.
On Revesby Island, the primary source of food is the white-faced storm petrel. They come here in their thousands each year. The females lay a clutch of eggs in these sandy burrows. The cool sand offers the young protection from the heat, but not from the tiger snakes, who make an easy meal of defenceless chicks. These white-faced storm petrels are only temporary residents on Revesby Island.
The white-faced storm petrels that nest on this island here are the only reason why the Revesby Island tiger snake does so well. Now, they nest here in their hundreds of thousands. Now, it's not only the young birds that are eaten by the tiger snakes, the adult birds are also eaten by the adult tiger snakes as well. To cope with the limited opportunities during the nesting season for these snakes to hunt their prey, they've actually developed a much stronger venom, enabling them to break down body tissue much faster. Now, they've also turned black. This enables them to warm up faster, and this aids their digestion. This makes it much quicker to digest the birds. So these snakes can eat more birds in a much shorter period of time. The mutton bird chicks grow very quickly, and in a very short time are just too big for the snakes to eat.
On nearby Chapel Island, the largest species of tiger snake also depends on seabirds for survival. The adult short-tailed shearwaters, sometimes known as mutton birds, also raise their chicks in sandy burrows. They are much bigger than the petrels of Revesby Island, so it stands to reason that the tiger snakes living on Chapel Island have evolved to be larger and more venomous than any others in the species. The Chapel Island tigers must also strike fast and frequently in order to take advantage of the mutton bird's short nesting season. By day, the parents are off hunting fish, only returning to the nest to tend their chicks at dusk. This leaves the young vulnerable to attack. Late in the nesting season, this snake struggles to consume what will probably be its last chick. It's likely that the tiger snakes of Chapel Island will continue to evolve and grow larger so that they will be able to hunt further into the mutton bird's breeding season. For now though, in a bizarre twist of fate, predator and prey become unlikely housemates when the chicks grow too large to be eaten. Although they've had to adapt to harsh conditions and temporary food sources, the snakes living in the Sir Joseph Banks archipelago have been able to live peacefully and without the external human pressures of their cousins on the mainland. Their very isolation on these inhospitable islands has enabled them to not only survive, but also flourish. The tiger snakes are the kings of these islands, and as long as the seabirds continue to nest here, they will remain top of the food chain.
On Chapel Island near Tasmania, the tiger snakes are the biggest binge eaters of them all. They eat big prey and they become big snakes.
Having lived with snakes all his life, Rob says it never ceases to amaze him just how many tall stories, myths and misconceptions there are about snakes as a species. If even half of them were true, then he'd probably be scared to death of snakes too. But the truth is, snakes are pussycats.
want you to look at this snake's head very carefully. Boo! See, didn't move. He couldn't hear that. Also, watch this. Snakes are deaf and almost blind. So if anyone has ever thought they were chased by a snake, they were chased by a deaf-blind animal that can't run. And if you, I know you might have thought you're being chased, but you really weren't.
With limited senses, snakes are able to move, hunt and kill in a number of different environments. But their sensory limitations mean that they can become easily confused, especially when something as unpredictable as a human being with an extreme snake phobia is added to the equation. Although snakes are deaf, they can feel vibrations through their bodies. For this reason, it's a good idea for walkers to tread heavily in order to alert any snakes in the area. Sensing large vibrations, the snake will perceive that a threat is approaching and will retreat to safety.
When I was a kid, about 9 or 10 years old, we were coming back from a trip of catching snakes with my dad. The bloke who first got me interested in snakes, but I had no choice. We had a bag full of king browns in the back seat. Now, the king brown is not the deadliest snake in the world, but he injects about 100 times more venom than a common brown snake, who is the second most deadly snake in the world. So to get bitten by one, it's just as bad. Now, everything was going along quite fine until one of them decided he was sick of the bag and went for a bit of a wander.
Before Rob knew it, it had crawled onto his body.
Dad, snakes are out. Dad, I think the snakes are out.
Good evening, Ravi.
His dad's advice was, after first suggesting that he was dreaming, to stay still and the snake wouldn't bother him. Joe Sr. certainly knew snakes, so young Robbie took his advice.
Sure enough, the snake crawled off me without any drama. That's why I'm here to tell the tale. If you ever find yourself in a position real close to a snake, just do as I say, stand real still. In a little while, he'll be on his merry way. You'll be happy, he'll be happy, and everybody will be alive and well, won't they?
Next, we take a look at the snakes most responsible for scaring people. The cobras, anacondas, and the so-called man-eating reticulated pythons. These are the snakes people love to fear. The species that have made a name for themselves on the silver screen and found a permanent place in the human psyche. But are they really so frightening?
Another very famous snake is the cobra, or Cobra family. Now, most people think that cobras kill more people than any other snake, in fact, the king cobra. But that's not true. Like the rattlesnake, he lets you know he's there. Stands up and flats his little neck out. Now, this little fellow thinks if he's going to flatten his head out and stand up, I'll go away. But he's wrong. Most people would, of course. Now, if you notice, he can only strike down in a downward sort of a fashion, straight down, flat. Come on, come on. So I can actually, if I wanted, put my hand over the top and actually touch him on his head. You can't do that with a brown snake. He'd have you straight away. Now, this is the Aussie brown snake. Even though he's the second most deadly snake in the world, he kills a lot less people than the cobra, because he's a runaway snake. He doesn't stand his ground. Now, you saw when he went through me legs where I stood still. If I'd have moved, he might have had a go at me. Okay, matey. Quite fast. And a killer too. When you're talking big snakes, the anaconda of South America is the heaviest snake, and it does grow big enough to eat people. And if you want to find one, You got a feel for them. Got one. Here's a baby version of the anaconda. He's about maybe 7 foot long. When they get to about 20 feet, then they're dangerous. You might wonder what I'm doing up here in a tree. Well, I'm waiting for the dreaded boa constrictor to find me. Now, a lot of people think that the boa constrictor is a dangerous snake. But of all of the bigger pythons, he's the pussycat of the family. He doesn't grow big enough to eat you. Around 3.5 meters would be maximum, that's all. Oh, look what we've got here. I knew if I waited here long enough, one would find me. Isn't that a beautiful snake?
Like the anaconda, reticulated pythons have come to be feared due to their sheer size. The green anaconda may be the largest snake on the planet, but the reticulated python is the longest. It's been reported that reticulated pythons can grow up to 10 meters or over 32 feet in length. Although they do not possess venom, they are a formidable predator and are capable of killing their prey in seconds.
They're that fast. And this one's only 20 feet long and about 200 pounds in weight. You can see how some unsuspecting people in the jungles of Southeast Asia and South America get taken. They're ambush hunters. They lie in wait, just waiting for some unsuspecting animal or person to come by. Snakes aren't stupid. With their excellent sense of smell, they find the animal paths, in other words, the main roads the animals use in their native habitats, and just wait. Now, this one was raised by my dad and looked after by the family. This is my family and just one of our pets. Isn't she a beauty?
All a snake need do is taste the air and pick up the scent of its prey. In this case, the python has found quite a large victim. Once the life has been crushed out of the deer, the massive snake took 2 hours to down his meal. Snakes have the ability to dislocate their jaws to consume large prey. The bones are not fused, enabling the bottom jaw to split apart.
Now, pythons do grow big enough to eat people. What I'm going to try and show you here is how quick they can kill their prey. They strike and wrap it up. The prey is dead within a minute. Now, I couldn't demonstrate this with the big python because I don't want to be dinner. But imagine if that was you.
Next, we enter the world of the taipan. One bite from this snake contains enough venom to kill around 250,000 mice. Taipans move, strike, and kill faster than most other snakes. Australia is home to 2 species, the coastal taipan and the inland taipan. Both snakes are relatively fast-moving burrow dwellers, but it's here in the cane fields of North Queensland, Australia, that the coastal taipans are thriving.
There would have to be hundreds of these coastal taipans in these cane paddocks. They couldn't hope for a better home. In this type of environment, rat populations tend to explode, so he doesn't have to go too far for a feed.
Although the introduced black rat has been of great benefit to the taipans, the original species it displaced was the brown bandicoot, a rat-like marsupial. A much larger animal with long, sharp teeth, the bandicoot could be quite a formidable opponent. The fact that the coastal taipan evolved to hunt the brown bandicoot explains why it first developed the strike and retreat hunting technique it still uses today. With its body temperature perfect for hunting, this coastal taipan moves effortlessly through the cane, tasting the air for any signs of its prey. It isn't long before the taipan senses a rat nearby. When the taipan enters the burrow, the unsuspecting rat finds itself trapped. The taipan strikes fast and retreats. This technique means that the taipan can immobilize its prey without risking any injury from sharp teeth and claws. The rat is dead in seconds, and the taipan returns to safely consume its meal.
The inland taipans are much tougher than their coastal cousins. They've had to evolve into a harsh, unpredictable desert environment, and they are the most lethal snake on the planet.
The rain signals the start of a new breeding cycle for the desert rats, which are the primary food source for the inland taipan. Knowing that the rat population is soon to explode, the taipans also begin to mate. A female taipan must time her gestation to perfection and ensure that she finds the most suitable burrow to deposit her eggs. It might not rain here for another 5 years, and so she needs to give her young the best possible chance of survival. Moisture from the rain will support this taipan's eggs for 2 to 3 months until they hatch.
The taipans lay large eggs to give their young the best chance in survival. At birth, both taipans are big enough to consume marsupial mice and field mice, baby rats, lizards, small quails, so it gives them the best shot at life.
If all has gone to plan, then the eggs will be swollen with moisture, almost bursting when the young are ready to hatch.
Even when just hatched out of an egg, the young taipans are just as deadly as their parents. Don't be fooled by their size. It's just the venom isn't as much as the big ones, but it's just as deadly. They can still kill.
Too small to hunt rats, the first meal for young inland taipans is likely to be a small lizard. The first few years of life will be tough for the young snakes. Many will become prey for birds, larger lizards, and even other snakes. The king brown is a likely predator. Being a cannibal, it's immune to all snake venom. Ironically, the king brown's venom is 40 times less effective on rats, and yet it still manages to kill other snakes.
Despite being the deadliest snake on the planet, the inland taipan has bitten very few people, and none have actually died. Being a snake man, I know a couple of them. My father was one. While out catching them, he grabbed a big one by the tail, and like a whip it flipped back and hit him on the chest. The other was my mate John Robbo Robinson, who took a bite while cleaning a cage. He was the 5th person ever to be bitten. As you'll see, the experience left him in pretty bad shape.
They're one of the few snakes that can cause irreversible nerve damage. So you could have a hand that's partially crippled, you can have a muscle that spasms, a muscle that doesn't work.
Each year around the globe, 100,000 people die as a result of being poisoned or envenomed by animals. In some countries, injury or death caused by snakebite is a more likely medical concern than cancer or heart disease, with more than 10% of hospital beds being occupied by snakebite patients. It's been estimated that the worldwide cost for people suffering from some type of envenoming is greater than $1 billion every year.
It stands to reason, as more land is being cleared for development, the animals there have to adapt to living with humans. Still, if humans displayed a bit of common sense, they would discover that they could learn to live in harmony with snakes.
A few years back, a mate of Rob's, John Robbo Robinson, learned the hard way that even a professional snake handler can get caught out from time to time. Robbo was cleaning the glass in one of the display cabinets when he was bitten by an inland taipan. It seems the taipan had taken exception to Robbo brushing against its tail while he cleaned. The inland taipan possesses the most deadly venom of any snake, and Robbo knew that he had to get to medical assistance fast. The first thing Robbo did was apply a pressure immobilization bandage to prevent the venom from travelling to his lymph glands and onto vital organs. He then waited in a cool area and tried to remain calm until an ambulance arrived. Brian Fry is a clinical toxinologist with the Australian Venom Research Unit.
Some firm pressure on that.
To demonstrate the effectiveness of snake venoms, Rob donates some of his own blood to see what may have happened in Robbo's body.
What we're going to do is we're going to add your blood to 4 different tubes. One we're not going to do anything to. The other one we'll add inland taipan venom, then mulga snake venom, and then for the last one we'll add sea snake venom. And what we want to do is show how they affect the blood.
Now, Brian Fry adds taipan venom to Rob's blood.
Now if you look, the inland taipan has already turned your blood completely into one giant clot. But that's not what's going to happen clinically. What happens when you're bitten is it forms thousands upon thousands of tiny little clots in your body. So your blood doesn't actually look like this, except for under a microscope. But what happens after that is that it's used up all your clotting factors, and then you can't clot at all.
And you bleed to death.
Well, potentially, yeah.
The first symptoms I noticed once I was in the hospital were sweatiness. I was starting to get a bit of a temperature and feeling quite queasy. I also had a lot of pain around the bite area. The actual muscle went all red and swelled up quite large, my arm, just around the bite area. It was actually so sore you couldn't press on it or touch it. The next thing I noticed was the lymph gland under my arm was swelling up like a golf ball, so I knew the venom was well and truly in the system and on its way.
Because Robbo works with snakes all the time, he was reluctant to take the antivenin, which would reduce his immunity in the case of future snake bites. Remarkably, Robbo pulled through, but as a result of the snake bite, he lost 24 pounds and later suffered a mild heart attack.
So a taipan bite causing a heart attack 3 weeks later, for example, is a bit atypical, and it might be more linked to a little bit of damage that occurred during the bite and then something else triggering that further on, as opposed to the venom still working 3 weeks later. There might have been effects that might have been reversed had he been given antivenom. It's pure speculation at this point, especially considering that the person who was bitten was very unusual in that he had received multiple snake bites earlier and had never received antivenom, despite having been bitten by snakes that were well known to be lethal. So he was the most unusual individual to begin with.
Robbo was lucky in the sense that he knew exactly what type of snake he'd been bitten by. With so many different species and colour variations, the average person would not know what type of snake had bitten them. Coming up, we'll see what happens when the residents of a sleepy coastal town are faced with a deadly snake plague. For many people, the idea of a snake plague in their hometown sounds like the equivalent of hell on earth.
There he is, people. Brown snake.
A A recent brown and black snake population explosion has left many residents of the sleepy seaside town of Byron Bay on the east coast of Australia screaming for the local snake catcher.
Byron Bay would have the highest call-out rate than anywhere else on the east coast of Australia. Well, out of nearly 2,000 snakes that I've had so far, I have had approximately 200 that were indoors, and most of them were really dangerous snakes.
The eastern brown snake is the second most deadly snake in the world. In the past year alone, George Ellis has received over 1,300 calls from residents about dangerous snakes.
Most of the snakes, I find them on the beach, on the foreshore, in councils, caravan parks and swimming pools, and generally in outdoor areas.
Here's one Byron Bay resident who owes her life to George Ellis.
I was hanging out the washing and I felt this flicking movement at my feet, and I just jumped back like that, and there was this quite big black snake reared up, very riled up, angry. I'd obviously stood on it.
And it just bumped against the leg, nothing. Didn't feel any bite.
You can actually be bitten and not feel the bite, and it might not take effect for a couple of hours later. And I thought, well, I obviously felt something because I've looked at that spot twice. So I thought, well, maybe I better phone George and just talk to him about it. So I did.
Because I've had a lot of experience, as you can imagine, after all these years, I decided that she had been bitten.
And then he got here and he heard the story. He came out and he looked, he couldn't see the snake, but he deduced that it was a snake called a raffscale snake, which was quite poisonous, and said, well, I think it's better to play safe and assume that you got close enough for it to have bitten you and take you into hospital and get it checked out.
I took her to the hospital, they did the test, and they determined that she had been bitten.
And another horror story.
Well, the call came around about 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, and the lady was really screaming and carrying on in the front. It was quite, almost lost it, you know. And I said, what's going on, where are you? And she said, I'm standing on top of the fridge in my night. It was my two girls, and I could hear a noise in the background, like a thumping, a regular pattern. I said, what's that noise I hear? She said, the brown snake is attacking us. Now, when I turned up, by then the snake had moved because it was only agitated, and went inside, and you know where I found the snake? In Barbie doll's house under one of the girls' beds.
There's no doubt that the snakes of Byron Bay have bred in record numbers. While many of the local authorities are hoping that the snake plague will just go away, George is becoming increasingly frustrated and concerned about the number of venomous snakes living in the area.
Byron Bay has the highest concentrations of venomous snakes anywhere in Australia, if not the world. And the one that is most noteworthy in this area is the brown snake, and the increase in it is quite phenomenal. You know, a lot of the old-timers that have been here all their lives, they say that we never used to see brown snakes even in their mid-40s or 50s, and yet now there's virtually nothing but brown snakes. And as far as my personal statistics and records are concerned, the brown snakes outnumber the carpet snakes by about 200 to 300.
While the potential danger to residents is real, you really have to put yourself in a position to be bitten. In fact, you really have to stand on, try and catch or kill the snake to be bitten.
So far, we've looked at some of the deadliest, most efficient hunters and killers on land. But there are just as many venomous snakes lurking in the world's oceans, rivers and streams. Most aquatic snakes are venomous. The true sea snakes in particular possess some of the most toxic venom in the world.
While most sea snakes are highly venomous, people who have been bitten by them mostly survive. This is because sea snakes have very short fangs, inject tiny amounts of venom, and like terrestrial snakes, can control the amount of venom injected. More often than not, it's fishermen hauling in netted sea snakes, rather than swimmers, that are bitten.
Sea snake venom is deadly to man, but many believe their fangs are too small to inflict any real bite. Toxinologist and captive sea snake breeder Brian Fry disagrees.
One of life's greatest myths is that the sea snakes have tiny little fangs and almost no venom yield, and also that they're highly toxic, more so than any other land snake. This is a great myth. For example, when I'm scuba diving for them, I have to wear very thick wetsuits because some of the sea snakes can have fangs up to 9 millimeters long enough to go through any wetsuit that I could wear. In addition, they can have huge venom yields, but the toxicity isn't anywhere near what you expect. Both the eastern brown snake and the inland taipan are both more toxic than any sea snake ever could be. However, many of the sea snakes are about on par with the coastal taipan, death adder, or tiger snake. At heart, they still remain, in my opinion, Australian land snakes.
Next, the last word on snakes. They've evolved over millions of years, but what challenges are they facing in the immediate future?
Oh, mulga snake, eh? Don't want to get bitten by one of those, eh? Give you some venom there, don't they?
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Amazing, isn't it?
Amount of venom in these snakes. They've actually given more venom than any snake in the world. The largest milking was well over 1 gram of venom. That's more than a king cobra, more than a gaboon viper, more than a taipan.
Amazing, eh?
So even though it's not the most toxic, it's one of the most dangerous because there's so much venom hitting you at one time.
Snakes may not be as cute and cuddly as other animals, but they've earned the right to live on this earth. Snakes have evolved over millions of years from the one species and have shown an extraordinary ability to adapt to even the most inhospitable environments.
As a general rule, if you don't mess with them, they won't mess with you. The vast majority of the bites occur to young males, 16 to 25 years old. A little bit of alcohol is often involved, but they're playing with the snakes. They're trying to catch it, they're trying to be macho, they're trying to show off. That's a guaranteed way to get bitten. A lot of bites actually occur to after someone's been bitten and someone tries to catch the snake to identify it. Something you don't need to do in Australia. We can identify what bit you just through tests that we do on the bite site itself. In fact, there was a great envenomation up in Brisbane a few years ago where a man killed a taipan in his yard, was showing it off to his neighbors, swinging the dead snake around and around, hit his neck, and envenomated himself that way. Definitely a candidate for the Darwin Award. So, it comes back to, if you don't mess with them, they won't mess with you. You can quite safely coexist. And, as many areas of America have found out when they've absolutely destroyed the local rattlesnake populations, snakes are a necessary part of us to live healthy. They keep the mice down. Mice are more likely to kill you by spreading a disease than snakes are through biting you.
Fear and ignorance are one thing, respect and understanding another. Like an onion has many layers, the snake will continue to shed its skin throughout its life. It is my hope that through the correct education, we humans can peel back the layers of misconceptions, false truths, tall tales about snakes. If we can do this, then there is every chance that more people can learn to live in harmony with this beautiful reptile. My name's Rob Brettle. Thanks for joining us on Killer Instinct.